And welcome back to the Homeowners Q&A Podcast. I'm with Richard Burrows again. Thanks for coming across again, Rich.
Pleasure.
Today we're going to take a different perspective. We're going to look at what it's like being an installer of heat pumps in the UK. I know that there's been a lot of changes in the industry. There's a lot of things like HeatGeek, Zero Disrupt, and it's all putting small pressures on the actual installers. And that might in turn have an impact on homeowners. So you're not an installer, Rich, but I know you, like myself, are in touch with a lot of these guys. What are you hearing?
I'm hearing a lot on the ground that there's definitely a lot of pressures on installers these days. So from financial perspectives, so from homeowners, so just people not replacing boilers. So from boiler industry side, a lot of people unsure whether they need to go with heat pumps or whether they're going to keep that boiler going. So from a lot of that side, boiler sales have dropped quite a bit. And with renewables, obviously there's big, not issues with that, but there's big costs involved in heat pump installations. So big sums of money as well when you think about it. So from like an installer's perspective, you've gone from maybe a couple of grand swap to like big, 15, 16, 17,000 pound heat pump installs. A lot of them, not only have you got the pressures of that side, but also like how do you handle that money? Do you know what I mean? How do you handle that? Because you're used to taking a couple of grand in a business and all of a sudden you're handling sums of 15, 16,000 pounds and might look good in the bank, right?
So your turnover goes up as an installer. All of a sudden you start to think, oh my goodness, I'm in the money. But obviously I would imagine that then the expenses are also going up, so you need to try and balance all of that out.
Well, with for instance, obviously we run a merchant, right? So from our side, the sums of money that we're now dealing with installers with, you've gone from, like I said, £1,000, £1,500 worth of materials to like £7,000-8,000 worth of materials in one hit. So, from our perspective, we're getting asked, can we put that on credit? How can we pay for this? Can the homeowner pay for this? And this all sort of questions that we sort of get in now that we'd never had before. I do see it, I do get it, but I always think if you're relying on credit, if you're relying on the VAT money, if you're relying on things like that to enable your amount of money you can actually have to facilitate these things, I think that's a really dangerous place to be.
I think from a homeowner's perspective is that you probably look at the installer and go, I've just paid you 15 grand. You would then assume that installer has made a tidy profit on that job. But I'm hearing that they are actually getting squeezed more and more and more and more. So, probably the cost of heat pumps, the cost of materials. There's an awful lot more equipment and an awful lot more product that goes into a heat pump installation. So, it's not to say that, they're probably charging 15 grand for that install and walking away with 7 grand. I don't think that's the case at all.
No.
So I think that's something from a homeowner's perspective, they should be cognizant of the fact that these installers are probably making a killing on your install, but equally so, then it's that balancing act now where, you're paying a lot of money. So you would expect a high quality installation. You don't want to now be kind of pinching that installer even more for him to cut a couple of cheap corners to get your bill down by 500 quid.
Yeah.
But you're going to see that in the quality of your install.
I think we've got to be very, very careful with what's deemed as a quality installation, so the difference is between finishing off work properly, it's always that analogy, isn't it? Like Friday afternoon is the worst day you can finish an installation. Yeah. We've experienced it, had calls on a Friday afternoon, Rich, like, how do I wire this up? And you're like, why have you left it?
Yeah.
Why have you left it to that sort of position where Friday's that last day to finish that install? You've got a handover, commission, everything else on that day, and you've got another job booked for potentially the next Monday. Are you going to work your weekend to get that finished? Or do you guys have the pressures on your family to do that? I think the whole thing with the, big sums of money, customer expectation, and the realism side of it, I think like you've got to be really realistic on what you're going to get. So it's really important, I think, to check from like quote stage and have that conversation with your installer is actually what are you going to get? Maybe get the time scales in that conversation. What am I expecting on every day? What's going to happen at the commissioning handover stage? How is that going to go? If it ends up that they're on a Friday afternoon and they're leaving at, and they're rushing to get out of the door at like 6, 7 o'clock at night and you don't think everything's handed over and you don't think it's finished, that's just pressures on everyone then, because are you going to get that installer back? Are you happy handing over your money at that point? They're not fully on board. They've not really handed over that heat pump to you. Are you happy to hand that money over from a homeowner perspective? When you're cramming things in, and you're more, you're very conscious that, okay, I've brought the price, I've brought the price down because it's competitive out there, or different companies who are doing it for like the bus grant. And, for that as like a one-man band competing against people who maybe bigger organizations that are trying to do it for the bus grant, are you ever going to win in that situation? Not without devaluing your materials or changing your heat pump brand. You might buy a cheaper heat pump. There's so many factors in that with a heat pump, you generally are paying for what you get, and like the quality difference and say the cost difference, maybe more than the quality difference, but the cost difference between like the top premium brand heat pump and the bottom and like, bottom end heat pump brand is a lot, right? Could be a couple of grand, might be $3,000, might be $4,000 difference between the two. So what exactly is being quoted on the job, and how's that materials being paid for, right? Especially one-man bands.
When we've spoken to installers on this podcast, they always say, you need to factor in a certain amount of time in order to guarantee that quality installation. And that number's usually about a week, so 5 days. So kind of starting on a Monday, being commissioned on a Friday afternoon. But that's kind of the time frame, and that's probably from a business perspective, from the installer's perspective, they probably factored in that time, those amount of resources to, turn a small profit on that job to make themselves profitable going forward. Now the problem starts to happen as something goes wrong, then you start having that kind of knock-on effect.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that homeowners have to be super aware of, is that, and there's actually a thread that's running on the forums where I said, do I just go with the cheapest quote? And I think in this instance, that is very, very dangerous because, if these guys are factored in 5 days and now all of a sudden you're going to expect them to come back for 2 weeks or 3 weeks to keep doing work, there's no way that they're going to justify that from a purely financial business perspective.
It's a financial perspective. That's what we forget, I think, sometimes. From a business proposition and perspective, you've quoted that money. You've quoted the labor, the material. If you go over that labor cost, so you're now going outside of your quotation amount, is the homeowner in agreement that they're happy to pay you for any additional extras? Is that written into the quote on the terms and conditions side? With heat pumps, nothing's ever straightforward, especially on retrofit. New build, fair enough. You know what you're doing. You've got pipework runs. You know what you're quoting. You know what you're installing. On retrofit, you come into it and you're going, okay, well, that radiator down there, it should have been working. Do you know what I mean? But it isn't working, so we're going to have a look what's going on. But you haven't quoted that. Who pays for that? Is it clear to the homeowner they might have to pick that cost up?
That kind of segues us very neatly into HeatGeek's Zero Disrupt. So I've spoken to a lot of installers since this announcement. Kirsten actually spoke to Adam there. Hi, Adam. I think that there's a bit of a race to the bottom here now, where they're almost going to now start to try and not factor in things in the house, just like, we'll accept all the flaws in their property, be that radiator sizes, emitters, even hot water cylinders, which I find a bit sketchy, but, whatever. And they're just going to try and, put these heat pumps in with zero disruption to the homeowner, all in a bid to probably get that initial installation down. I call it kind of CapEx. The capital expenditure is now being shifted to OpEx, the operating expenditure on that particular project. So even though you're not paying a bigger amount up front, you're going to be paying that off for the rest of your life, really, because you're putting in a slightly less efficient system. Where do you sit on the whole zero disrupt model?
I'm not scared, because if you do calculate the heat loss and you go, what, actually all the radiators are oversized, that we can run it at these lower flow temperatures, we can do that. I don't see too much wrong with it. It's when it comes to the point at which you're on that borderline, right? And the homeowner, are they really in the position to make that decision? Surely at a quote stage, when you're going in and you're looking and you're quoting, you're going, okay, well, we could get this to run at 45-degree flow temperature. Yeah, we could do that. But actually, it's not going to run where you've decided to stop at. We're going to have to run it at 55-degree flow temperature. Yeah. Is that really portrayed to the homeowner? These are things that maybe I'm concerned about, is how well is that portrayed to the homeowner that they're going to have that cost for that period of time? Is it really well explained that that's going to happen? Or is it just the fact that someone's so desperate to get a heat pump, it's at any cost? Yeah. And I always think this thing where I don't really like the any cost sort of thing. I kind of lost we should be doing all this for the right reasons, and that was some of the things that I really like about HeatGeek, is the fact that they were doing the right things. They were having those conversations with homeowners, and maybe I think the problem is HeatGeek are losing lots of business to that though. So instead of actually having the business that they should be getting, because they're giving the right advice, they're quoting at the right amounts to do that work, actually they're not getting that. They're getting another big company come in, quote it at that so-called zero disrupt, which, I mean, it's not a new thing. Other companies are doing this.
Yeah.
I think they're just following sort of the money rather than actually sticking to their principles. I don't know. Is it the right thing? Is it? Time will tell, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you should be very aware that if you're not changing radiators, if you're not maybe bringing the flow temperatures down on your heat pumps as much as you should do or could do, then you are going to have that sort of positions where your operational costs are going to remain at that sort of point, unless you physically do something about it. So there's no saying that you can't in the future upgrade your radiators to a lower flow temperature. But they're going in and going, okay, well, this system needs to run at 55 at worst case scenario point. Yes, it might run at lower temperatures when your ambient's higher temperature outside. Cylinders not being changed potentially.
Yeah.
Radiators not being changed potentially. I mean, is there a point at which you go, okay, well, these radiators are 30 years old. How does the installer feel? Because I think how I would feel, and I'm ex-tool, so I do have a good handle and good perspective on being an installer. And for me, I used to be very high quality installs. I didn't used to fight on the bottom. I used to do the high end stuff. And I know in my head that if I was going into their houses, would I want to be turning around to them in a year's time and going, you know what, we need to be changing these rads? And are there other installers out there that go, you know what, I'm not actually happy about what we've done here. I'm starting to feel a bit uncomfortable about that, because I would have normally done this or that or the other. And now I'm kind of being forced to do this because that's what the homeowners selected. It's not a no from me. It's kind of like, it's okay, because you are going to have, like, the HeatGeeks are really top of their game installers, right? So you are going to have a guy come into your house and do this that's top of their game, right? But are they still top of the game but with their hands tied behind their back? Because that's what worries me, is they it looks good, the pipework looks good, the pipes are insulated through the walls, the bits pieces that a normal HeatGeek would do are all done and it's all lovely. But that back end of that heating system, do you know what I mean? If it's old or it needs updating, or like I said, is that a dangerous ground? I don't know. We'll have to see, I think.
So as a consumer looking in on the industry, I look at HeatGeek and they're almost victims of their own marketing and positioning in the actual market, because they did start as a training company and they're trying to increase installation quality and all the rest of it. And at the end of the day, they're a business too. And obviously they must have hit a point where they thought, well, we need to pivot here, bring installers in, which they did, up the game, and now they're pivoting again. But the feedback that I'm getting is that, well, all these pivots are fine, but, there's guys that have invested a lot of money in the HeatGeek training that have now been told they have to remove the HeatGeek logos from vans, attire, letterheads, whatever it is. And they're now having to pay an extra fee now to be part of this new kind of HeatGeek squad. Pay, I think it's 300 or 350 pounds a month that they need to contribute towards that. These are all things that are, again, squeezing. And for me, that probably equates, and for the installers, that just means, well, I'm just going to have to spend a day less on site. I'm going to have to do this faster. I'm going to have to do this cheaper, quicker, whatever it is. Do you think that is a danger for installers and for consumers?
So I know some of the pressures these guys are under to deliver. And with spiraling costs, I mean, it's not just that, is it? It's not just the schemes. It's not just the extra £300 a month to be part of that scheme, or this, that, and the other. It's been insurance. It's been van costs. Like, vans are more expensive to buy. Finance. Everything. And that's what I mean. Everything's loaded. That's what it is. So it's not just that, is it? Then you've got to pay for the extra bits on top. It's not just like a core payment. There's all these other hidden things. I don't expect homeowners to understand the business or the insights of what goes into these installers and all that sort of thing. But I do think that, these guys, especially one-man bands, right? They're burdened with all these things. Do you know what I mean? You've got the same sort of setup, the same insurances, everything else. Doesn't matter whether you're a one-man band or whether you're a guy that owns a business of 10 installers. they're all the same pressures. They're all the same things, and it can only, the small guys, it can only go on to those guys, and they must get to the end of the day and go, oh my God, what, where am I going next? What am I doing next? Because, I mean, I was talking to a local installer here, and he was literally like, look, the time I've quoted jobs, gone out, done a day's site work, come home, I'm still doing MCS paperwork at like 11, 12 o'clock at night. And how long can you sustain that for? I just think it's just going to have a real impact on people's like well-being, their mental health. And I think unless you're really, really careful, or you've got people that can help you, I think it's just a downward spiral. You've got the pressures like never before. We didn't have these pressures with gas boiler swaps, right? It's literally someone call you up on a Wednesday. They've got a boiler that's gone down. You'd be out there. You'd swap it over. No calcs are done, are they?
Yeah.
No calculations. If you've got a 30 kilowatt combi on the wall, you'd swap it with another 30 kilowatt combi. Yeah, you haven't got these pressures. The whole heat pump thing is just completely different.
And the extra pressure that gets lumped on them is that, especially in the retrofit, you don't know what you're dealing with. So, you're going to go in there and you think, well, it worked fine on my last job. I'm going to come and apply a similar methodology here. And all of a sudden it hasn't.
Yeah.
And now you're having to spend more time. So I can imagine that the financial and emotional pressure on these guys must be telling.
Yeah, especially not getting paid straight away, right?
Yeah, true.
Like some instances of like the bus grant, and I think sometimes they were a bit slow to pay the bus vouchers and stuff like that. And who's footing that money? Is it the installer footing it, or is it the homeowner footing it? Because if the installer's footing that money, if they've got 2 or 3 jobs between getting paid off the bus voucher, they really got that money? I don't think they have.
This isn't just another book about heat pumps. The Ultimate Guide to Heat Pumps brings together the collective voice of over 35 contributors, engineers, designers, troubleshooters, and homeowners with more than 7,500 installations and 585 years of combined experience. It's no-nonsense, practical advice to help you get it done first time. Available now, link in the description. So we spoke about HeatGeek. The other kind of badge of acceptance in the market has always been MCS. And MCS, I just want to make it very clear, is not a badge of high quality or anything like that. They are purely the gatekeeper for funds. So they are basically signing off the checks. They've got absolutely nothing to guarantee in terms of quality. Do you think that the MCS has got a far greater responsibility in this whole kind of ecosystem of heat pump installations to try and increase standards? Because we've had HeatGeek, which, that is a private business. You've got MCS, which is kind of, well, not government, but you know what I mean? Or should they be more held accountable to actually increasing installation quality?
I was always told that they're a bit of a gentleman's club. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit of a club. Yeah, you've got to pay to be in it, be paid to be part of it, got to follow all these standards. It doesn't actually guarantee any quality. So you've got to then question yourself, what do they actually do? What actually they're doing? Because obviously the equipment's got to be certified to MCS standards. It's got to be certified to a MCS, efficiency point. What actually are those MCS standards and how do they apply to a homeowner? So if you've had a heat pump installed and we've had a whole job done, who's the guy that goes, yeah, that was a quality install and that was done correctly? Who is that gatekeeper? Because it's handed out to these other bodies, which there's a variation on how they deal with you as far as an installer goes. If you have an issue, you try and then pinpoint that down to the person who's responsible for that. Does it go back to the consumer code? Goes back there, it doesn't sound like they do a lot. If you try with MCS, you need to speak to your certification body. Speak to the certification body. What do they do? It's been set up in a way that actually no one actually answers or no one's accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the best business in the world, right? I wish I could run my business like that, yeah? Rob, where I sell bits and if it all goes wrong, I'm not accountable. No, sorry, it's that body owner. No, it's those people down there. It's the problem. It's not me.
And it's the finger pointing that's the biggest problem in this. And I think that this also drives a lot of installers a little bit crazy just as much as it does homeowners. And we're a perfect example of that. So we had our heat pump installed by Global Energy Systems. They subcontracted that work to a different installer. Now it's just become a matter of kind of finger pointing. Well, it wasn't us, it was the subcontractor. The subcontractor said, well, it was the tea lady. And then the tea lady says, well, and it was so and so. It doesn't really gel. And there's just so much finger pointing that actually happens. So as far as I'm concerned, because we have got MCS, it's whoever's name is on that MCS certificate that I would hold accountable for that job. That might not necessarily be correct or right. It's still not going to help you, because we've had cases on the forums where there have been homeowners that have been stuck in complaint loops for 4 years. Patience just gets pushed to the absolute limit, and they still haven't resolved things. So until that particular aspect gets actually sorted, it'll actually probably remove a lot of the cowboy installers that are actually in the market. If MCS and the certification bodies and some of the other codes became a little bit more aggressive in terms of weeding them out, I think we automatically see an increase. But it's not in their interest to do that, because these are all paying members to their little clubs, as you said. So
I mean, we have the same problem in GasSafe, where there's 100,000 installers. How's the limited people that they employ going to check every one of those installers? It's like one of those Mission Impossibles, isn't it? They're never going to be able to. MCS isn't big enough to check everyone. The certification body isn't big enough to check everyone. It's really, really hard, isn't it? I said a long time ago, what we should do is have heat meters on all properties. Have that linked up to a centralized network.
That's right. Brilliant.
It's part of the MCS, right? If you're having an MCS compliant install, you've got to have a heat meter. There was arguments back, it's going to cost the heat meter. But if you don't do the heat meter, if you don't fit it, and you don't have some sort of verification that installation is hitting a certain level of efficiency, how is there any accountability for anything? You could have little red flags coming up on a screen going, well, none of these systems here, and they've all been fitted by the same installer. Hang on, we need to go and investigate that. It would be so easy, or it could be so easy. And all the time, I always think it's, like I said, people paying into their club. If they don't have these guys paying, it doesn't matter whether you're the best installer or the worst installer, you're still paying into their club.
The only problem with that is that MCS still haven't created that kind of benchmark figure for what it is. So a great example of Andre, who's just been on the forums, he's paid £22,000 for a heat pump. It was done by then a HeatGeek member on HeatGeek's platform. I understand that they've been scrapped from that platform since. But their system performs at 1.8. They've got a 1.8 SCOP. And they had raised this. They'd complained to MCS, and MCS have just gone, well, it is what it is. Until MCS have actually said, well, each installation needs to hit at least 2.8. That benchmark needs to be set. It would protect everybody. It would protect the homeowner. It would protect installers. It would just create so much more stability in the market, but it's just not happening.
I worry about it because, it's really hard to hit 1.8. Yeah, so, to do that, you must have there must be a, ceiling missing or something in the house.
And you pay £22,000 for the privilege.
The fact that he's paid, or, they've paid so much money, I despair. You're paying that money to an installer who's, HeatGeek, come off the HeatGeek map, HeatGeek certified. You are expecting a level of competency. Obviously, it's in HeatGeek's interest to maybe go back through their database and actually, maybe they're doing that now. I don't know. But, certainly from an MCS perspective, if that was monitored or metered and it flagged up, you'd be inspecting that. I would be. If I just don't get it. It's almost like we know there's issues and faults and problems with our, I hear it. I've heard that. Ian Rippon, I've heard him say that loads of times, right? We've got a plan. They've always got a plan. Show us the plan.
Yeah.
Make it robust. Make it so installers know where they need to be.
Yeah.
And what the penalty is for not meeting those requirements. Don't do it hidden later.
Yeah.
Don't have bus grants that run out, or the tokens run out and you can't claim the money, or you've got to pay this fee to someone and they'll never check you. Or, you pay fee to that one and they come out to site and they argue with you in front of a customer that you've done something wrong, but they haven't got the knowledge to argue with you. It's madness what I keep hearing out there good installers that are having these inspections. And, when they go out and see a bad job and they report it, it's not being followed up.
That's the problem.
I don't get it. There are major flaws in it all. I hope to God that it all just gets resolved at some point.
In terms of the actual installers, a lot of things that we've described, a lot of the frustrations from the consumer homeowner's perspective, probably amplifies on the part of the installer, because he's the one that's getting, a rollicking from probably not MCS, but, from a lot of other quarters, which is, again, putting pressure on them emotionally. It's putting financial pressures on them. Do you think that there's anything that we could potentially do to try and make the lives of installers a little bit easier when it comes to these things?
I think the harsh reality of heat pumps is they're not going to be easy jobs to do. Yeah. I think from an installer perspective, they're a hard install. They've been used to fixing gas boilers and fitting gas boilers. You're now faced with just a heat pump alone. It's over 100 kgs. Yeah, so you've gone from fitting 25 kg boilers on walls to now having to think about, hang on a minute, how am I going to do this on my own? The reality is you can't do it on your own. And if you do try and do that on your own, if you're used to fitting boilers and you're going to try and fit heat pumps, it's a different bag. You try and take all that on, and with the, like I said, the pressures of the, being MCS accredited, all the financial extra burdens that you've now got, you're going to gear yourself up into a point where if you've not got a full business plan and a business model in place on how you're going to go forwards with that business, how you're going to create that business, how you're going to educate yourself to make sure that every installation you do is to a certain standard, because you're not going to learn that through MCS.
No, you're not.
They might guideline you and have, MCS or I think it's the MIS paperwork that they have. They're going to give you guidelines, but they're not going to teach you. You've got to go out there. You've got to educate yourself. You've got to work out how you're going to run your business, how you're going to move those heat pipes. How are you going to get it it's like Wes, Wes, we were talking about that the other day. We did it with an event. He has to get heat pumps over buildings. I mean, can't physically take them through the house, can't get the cylinders through the house. They won't go through the doorways. He has to get cranes to take them over. You never have that with a boiler. What does he think? Some days he turns up and he starts measuring doorways and goes, oh yeah, I've got to get another crane here.
If you've got any questions about heat pumps, then you need to join the Renewable Heating Hub forums. You can connect with other homeowners, share experiences, and get advice on heat pumps and renewables. Sign up today and be a part of the conversation. Link in the description. I know I give installers a bit of stick at times, but I also need to kind of take a step back and actually look at it from their perspective, because they are trying to run successful businesses. They've got families. They're trying to pay the bills just as much as anybody else that's running any other job, right?
Yeah.
And I think that cutting corners and having consumers put extra pressure on them is probably not the right thing. Heat pumps are expensive. We said this all the time. You're not going to pay for a good install anything less than 10K, plus the best voucher or whatever it is, but you are going to pay a substantial amount of money for that. So I would personally spend an extra $1,000 and just make sure that what I'm going to get is perfect, as opposed to trying to save 500, put an extra lot of pressure on him, and him getting what he wanted for that job is just going to motivate him to actually complete it to the best of his ability, to his standards. And then everybody's happy.
Yeah, you've got to have a level of flexibility, because you've got to try and understand as a homeowner that basically these installers coming in, they've given you a quote based on what they can see. And there will be hidden things that you just can't predict on a quote.
Yeah.
So if they do come up against something, you've got to have that flexibility to go, you know what, it is going to cost another $1,000, but if you don't do this, it's not going to work properly.
Yeah.
You need to have that level of detail that in the quotes and have that installer conversations to say that, okay, there is a contingency here. Maybe even for the installers, if you're not building contingencies in, maybe build a contingency in and say, look, I've built it into the quote, this, like £1,000 or 1,500 contingency. If we don't use it, you can have it back. Rather than have that conversation afterwards to say, really sorry, but it's going to cost you another 1,500 quid this. Yeah, but the irony is, people with iPhones, stuff like that, you go out happily, right? You go out happily and buy a 1,500 quid iPhone, but you won't spend 1,500 quid more on your installation. You won't listen to that installer's advice. It was good advice to you that actually you need to do this work. And you go, oh, it's another 50. It was just your new iPhone.
Yeah.
It was just that holiday where your holiday was $5,000. And yes, you can have a lovely time, but these people are putting things in your house that are going to give you the longevity in life, but the difference is we don't do those things. Maybe the heat pump has a half life.
Heat pump's not as sexy as an iPhone.
It's not, unfortunately. I think that's some of the problem is that, I think this is actually where the marketing of some of the heat pump manufacturers, they've actually gone down that route to try and make it sexy, to try and make it look when you buy one of these things, it's cool to put it on the front of your house because you've got a statement.
So I think from my perspective, Rich, when I actually look at this, there is actually a very big partnership between the homeowner and the installer. And I think it's in the best interests of that homeowner looking after the installer, because once they've installed that heat pump, that relationship can potentially go on for another decade, 2 decades. Heat pumps do require maintenance. They require a lot of work. They do sometimes go wrong. And I think that, if you've gone out and screwed them over, or you penny pinched or whatever it is, that's probably not getting that relationship off on the right foot.
Yeah.
And then I can understand why that installer might be resistive towards maybe working with them in the future. So do you think that relationship should be kind of give and take?
Yeah, don't sour it at the beginning, right? So I think if you're asking, breakdowns of quotes, I mean, fair enough in some instances, but I mean, I know that's like the number one. Mm-hmm. If someone's gone in and given you a quote, so if someone came in here, for instance, and gave you a woodworking quote, mm-hmm. would you ask how much the wood was? I know there's a load of guys out there that go, they go on the internet, they find out what I've quoted, and then they're going, oh, well, this is only £2,000 heat pump. And then they're not appreciating the fact that they've got to get it in position. Yeah. They've got a crane that's got to get it over the roof. You're not appreciating the whole quote or what's been quoted. So try not to sour it at the beginning, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Try and discuss properly with the installer. Okay, what are the works that you're going to do here? What's the scope of the works? Rather than actually what the costs are, what are the scope of the works? And how do you feel about that as a homeowner? So do you feel that that quote and those scope of works covers what you actually want? And if it's at the right price that you want to pay, then is it too high a price? Mm-hmm. I always think if you get the quote for like a garage or something, and it sounds good and that's the price you're willing to pay, you pay it, right? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't penny pinch on it. If the work sounds right, the work detail sounds right, and it sounds like the system that you want in your home, it's probably the right money for the right quote.
And I know that we singled out HeatGeek Zero Disrupt in this episode, just because it's new, it's just come out. But Octopus Energy have been doing this now for probably 2 years, maybe even longer. Yeah. They've been going after the low-hanging fruit, as they describe it. The easy installs where they don't have to do any disruptions to this property. They're just going in, snapping in a heat pump, and off they go. But my concern is, I think, quite similar to yours, in that the more companies that follow suit, it's almost going to start driving that price point down. So the guys that are trying to deliver that high quality work, then you'll start developing this big gap between, a price that's maybe 6,000 and his price of 10,000, but he's going to get it done shit hot, amazing. It's going to look and run incredibly, versus something that'll just be, no, well, it works.
Yeah, and that's been, I think, the problem with the Octopus thing actually, is where I've seen some of the Octopus installs actually on social media. Yeah. Octopus will come out. They'll send their guys back out to rectify bits. Mm-hmm. Is there the money in that, or will the installers from HeatGeek Zero Disrupt, will they have the money to do that? Have they got the time? Have they got that built in? Octopus have pretty much an unlimited fund, right? Yeah. Because they're getting the electricity off it. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
So, they will answer those questions and queries. And, I always think, this whole race to the bottom thing, it happens all the time. It's happening in, like, my side with heat pump supply. We should be able to make a profit. It's almost like it's a dirty word, but we're going back to the bad old days of supplying gas boilers for us. £50 on a £3,000 heat pump, that another merchant will supply it for, just to get feet in the door. And it just keeps coming down and down and down. And like I said, there's pressures on everyone, not just installers, but actually the merchant, the supply chain. Everything with heat pumps sort of stretches everything that everyone used to know, yeah? Try and encourage those relationships. Try and have a good relationship with your installer. If you like, with an installer point of view, have a good relationship with your merchant. Pay your bills on time. Try not to rely on them too much for credit. Have the money in your business to pay for those materials. So, if the installer has to take a loan to pay for materials and do their job, they should be doing that. They shouldn't be relying on credit and other people. And this is where we all kind of need to work together, from homeowner right the way through the supply chain, for it to all work properly. Mm-hmm. But right now, there's no incentives, government incentives, to actually help that happen. There's no 0% loans that I can take to buffer that. It's got to come out of my money or out of the manufacturer's money, but I've still got to pay that bill in 30 days' time, and it's no one's thought about that bit, I think. So I think from the supply chain point of view and the installer point of view, credit as well. That's another thing. It's just, we haven't mentioned that bit, but actually the credit the installer can get off one job, you know, they might only have a £5,000 credit or something like that, you know, but where are they getting their money from?
It's an interesting point, because you would have thought that the government would be incentivizing these guys to give them 0% loans to be able to just, you know, see them over. And I'm not saying, you know, extend a credit line of like millions of pounds, but, you know, give them some sort of breathing space to be able to run their business successfully, get their cash flow sorted out so that they can actually, you know, execute their job properly, hopefully get paid in time by the time they move on to the next one. And so they grow, they make more money, they're happier, they go into the next job, they're delivering a higher quality job, word of mouth spreads, you know, their business grows.
Yeah.
It's a win-win-win-win.
Yeah, it's on the companies at the moment, though. It is. When you think about the pressure on the installers and the supply chain as well, you know, before you even get to the homeowner's house, and let alone the homeowners that are arguing over things not being done, you know, because if the money stops with them at the end of the day, so if the money doesn't transact back, they don't pay the merchant doesn't pay the manufacturer, you know, it becomes a very horrible thing. And I don't quite think actually the government have thought that bit through. Where does all the money come from?
And equally so, when those installers get disgruntled fitting in the heat pumps and, you know, all the additional pressures, it's going to be so easy for them to just go, you know what, I've had enough, screw it.
Yeah.
I'm going back to slinging boilers in. We can still sling boilers in. Much easier life, much easier job.
Yeah, that's the sort of record we keep hearing all the time. Yeah, the same record keeps playing. Like, it's easier to do boilers. It's harder to do heat pumps. So the government need to make it less hard to do heat pumps. You know, and whether that's financial, training, whatever that looks like, they need to step in and do.
So for installers out there watching this, you know, we do empathize with you. We would try and cover kind of both sides of the story. But, you know, if you are an installer and you are struggling, or if you've got suggestions, I'm more than happy to try and take those forward as much as I can, actually pitch those to the powers that be, see if anything sticks. Because I think that without installers, heat pumps cease to exist.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to actually a few installers recently, and like they're suffering some of them with mental health issues at the moment, and it's the same things that sort of come up. So that's like homeowners not paying on time, bus grants not coming through, the voucher money not coming through on time, things like that. And these are all sort of stages that, you know, do have an effect on you, especially as smaller installers, smaller businesses, has a real big effect on your mental well-being. So I think maybe we'll talk about that another day, but yeah, you know, I think at the moment, you know, the more that, you know, people or government or local councils maybe can actually do to support the transition to renewables, you know, I think it'd be a much better place if they can help.
So I hope that you found this episode helpful and interesting. And if you are an installer, please leave a comment below. Leave your thoughts with us, and we'd be happy to, you know, continue discussing this, because I think it's just so important that installers are looked after, because, as I said just seconds ago, without installers, there is no industry.
No, very true.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you on our next episode. Bye-bye.